Bitcoin finally did what we wanted. Clean break and, more importantly, momentum. Certainly on that weekly time frame. Now, I'm not calling tops, obviously, you know that, but I am hoping in the next couple of months we're going to lock in some profits. And today I'm going to talk about the classic late cycle trap that a lot of people find themselves in. So if this sort of thing helps you keep your head and, more importantly, win some profitable gains, so to speak, in the crypto market, which can be quite rare for some, hit that like button and, more importantly, subscribe. So the context of this move is pretty big. It's a big move and it's bigger than you probably think. Daily time frame, you can see here quite obviously, we've had this big Giga Chad candle, kind of. Now, the reality is this is also looking pretty, well, I wouldn't say seismic, but it is pretty large on the weekly, and that momentum is pretty strong. We've had 2 weeks of, and then now we've had that 1 week bounce in and around where this 618 level was. Now, as you can imagine, some people are getting a bit flappy about this. And the one thing that I will talk about, and I don't want to be too dubious about it, but we have talked about certain people yeeting their bags and selling off pretty early, talking about RSI divergences. We've pretty much invalidated the RSI divergence with this one move alone based off a pullback. Do not get ratted out of these moves based off pullbacks, because you got to look at the bigger time frames, the higher time frames. And one question that I got yesterday on my Patreon MMQs, link below, by the way, if you're interested in a massive segment of a Q&A about reversals. What time frame is best for reversals? One, more often than not, the best time frame is usually the higher ones. Don't look too short-sighted. You will get problems. So when we talk about the obvious in the room here, momentum window is still here, in a way. But as you can imagine, you need to look at the higher time frames. You need to look at those and hold at those levels. And more importantly, look at where the strength is. We have strength again in Bitcoin, which has probably affected a lot of people's emotions right now, because people are starting to go, oh, hold on, are we back? October, back? Maybe, yes. Let's talk about something very, very important, which I did talk about just at the start. The late entry problem, why people get wrecked. Certainly in this market, we have that lockout stage, right, where we're at the end of the cycle, and every end of the cycle, people do arrive at the obvious breakout points, expecting instant riches, refuse to let time do the element, and get really pissy when, say, me, for example, will take profit even though I've been in the market for all this cycle, for example, right? So looking on the screen here, we could talk about how Ethereum was $1,377 in April. Why weren't people buying at those lows? For example, not everyone has been, and not everyone I'm talking to in this video. But ultimately what I'm saying is, if you don't buy the ugly lows, you don't fix that by oversizing at, say, $4,300, for example. And we can zoom out on the likes of Solana, for example, because most losses at the end of it are not from being wrong, it's from being impatient. That's just the reality of it. And people will lose out because they are trying to kind of get rich very quickly. And the thing is, time in the markets matter. Time in the final days, or trying to cram it all into, like, say, a 15-day window right at the end of an alt season, doesn't, realistically. Long story short, buy the lows, stay with it, and let the market do the heavy lifting. And when we talk about profit taking, for example here, scaling out isn't bearish, it's just the reality of it. It's kind of, in a way, your job if you're an investor. Now, I had someone comment on my last video saying there's a lot of what if scenarios, just stick with the point. But we are dealing with probability here. We have to look at certain situations to govern an outcome. It's like anything in life, right? Now, when we talk about my exit plan, certainly when it comes to the likes of Bitcoin and whatever you want to look at, it'll obviously depend on each situation. For me, I've got these extension levels up here and obvious round numbers where I will be looking to get out. The thing is, when you are trimming your profit, you need to have obvious areas. The Fibonacci sequence or exact random numbers or previous levels of resistance or support will always govern that. The situation is, if we break out up here and beyond this point, we are going to go to destinations all the way up here. It's time to lock in. Don't tap out on the dips. It's time to lock in and ride the momentum. Simple as that, right? If you want to have trailing stop losses or have a backup rule in case if Y and Z or whatever doesn't happen or does happen, you can always do that. But as I say, if you have been in this market for such a long period of time, you should be all right because things will be looking pretty good realistically. But as I say, it may well be the time to lock in right now. And yeah, be mindful of that. In terms of locking in, there's a massive welcome offer to win an iPhone on here, but ultimately as well, 20% back on fees. When the mania comes, and a lot of people ask me this question about what was it like in the previous cycles if you weren't here, it will get mad. And most times, exchanges do not handle the load. It gets a bit mental. So just be mindful. If it's quiet, get all your shit sorted, sign up to your exchanges, and use them. Now let's do some analysis on what's happening around the globe in terms of the rotation map. We were talking about this the other day, about Bitcoin dominance and what could be happening. And if this is going to reject at this level, realistically, it could be a very, very good thing for the rest of the market. Now, me personally, I've seen Ethereum, it's topped out a little bit from where it kind of ran, it pulled back, and now it seems to have found a bit more of its legs again. We'll look at the ETF inflow in a second. But more often than not, you've got to see this do the opposite to obviously Ethereum because it's got the biggest weight. But the thing that really is tickling my boat at the minute is the fact that the USD dominance and all that kind of stuff around, stable currency, the flow of that is looking really good. This may be a deviation to the upside and we maybe come back down. We need this to go down, money rotating into the market. And that's an obvious, really good situation. But likewise, with all this and obviously the Ethereum.D and others, all that kind of stuff, they are starting to turn again. Things are starting to get really, really interesting. And we are starting to see more and more people, it's very, very small, by the way, buying into altcoins, considering where we have been in the past. And that's because Ethereum has been doing very well. But when we talk about the likes of obviously the ETF inflows, the last couple of days, the Bitcoin one has been relatively strong. Bit of a wobble over the course of the end of September, but ever since, the end of September arrived, we've been doing pretty well. And that has also been backed up by the likes of Ethereum now turning on the tap, which has been good to see. We still have a buggerload of companies, treasury companies, that are buying into Bitcoin, which could change the narrative a little bit in terms of the longevity of where this market goes. Does it go longer than we expect? Does it go, do we get a violent correction because one of them's got liquidated? MicroStrategy, maybe, maybe not. You get the idea. But as I've alluded to in previous videos, we are nowhere near peak levels of euphoria or mania or stupidity. But things are getting a little bit nicer, kind of. But the keys to the entire kingdom rest with Vitalik and Ethereum, let's be honest. And it has bounced off a level of significance. I have talked about previous levels lower if we do get a correction on Bitcoin, but that Bitcoin resistance has been broken at the minute. Currently, we need it to continue throughout the rest of the week. That then may lead to Solana going much higher and into all-time high levels, which could get more and more manic periods within the meme coin sector. And then it may well lead to the likes of, I don't know, XRP, Sui, Dogecoin, insert random altcoin here or dinosaur coin here for a further breakout to the upside. Well, obviously, if this rejects and we go lower, you've got to kind of sit on your hands for a little bit longer. There may be further opportunities. But if we continue breaking up, things are going to get very, very interesting and there may be a bit of FOMO kicking in. The ultimate question is, and the obvious question, and feel free in the comments to let me know what you think, what price does Bitcoin need to be, or Ethereum, or the likes of Solana, to get people returning back, or new blood? But as I've alluded to it, this is all about quarterly returns time. Your edge isn't calling the tops. It's letting positions mature, act as an investor. Low patience will hurt you. And more importantly, scale out with strength. If you're in meme coins, you want the liquidity, you want to do that. Buy when strengths are confirmed in pullbacks as well. Because at the end of the day, if we follow anything from the prior years on both of these, it's going to be a nice finish. And hopefully a photo finish, and it's quite nice. So yes, it is time, I think, to get locked in. Whatever way you look at it, there's money to be made here. If you want more content, check out Patreon. There's links below. There's nice little lives on there and obviously Discord communities to help you out. But the fundamentals are very, very simple. If you fail to lock in, you probably will miss out on a lot of entries. My personal viewpoint, if you're still here and listening to me, if you look at some of those BTC pairs and the BTC charts around certain indexes, such as the others and whatnot, the altcoins haven't really moved yet. When they do, you'll know. It'll be horrible, especially if you miss out.